Here you see a photograph at the Einstein Monument on September 14, 2002. The photograph is from the July 1955 Scientific American article and interview with Einstein 2 weeks before he died. This photograph was placed on the chest and the heart of the statue of Albert Einstein to impress you with the great mind and heart of Albert Einstein. Einstein died on April 18, 1955, 2 months before this published article. According to the written report of Margaret Einstein, Timothy was 9 years old and under the stars of the night sky when he conceived of the possibility of an atomistic hierarchy with gravitation as the one and only field globally present and enwrapping his entire universe of stars which spread out across the night sky before him. Hence the universe of stars of Timothy B. Creer on the night of April 18, 1955 became enchantingly enriched with both gravitation and another theory of the possible structure to the universe as a whole. An assumption of extended structure that first led Timothy to question how big the universe could possibly be and if it should not extend forever outwards into what he later would call infinity. What had happened is, in the morning at school in the 3rd grade class of Mrs. Feldman, Timothy was taught Niels Bohr's solar system model of the atom with the carbon atom drawn on the blackboard. Next, within 12 hours at night observing the night sky, Timothy conceived of the next step in an equivalence principle of architectonic scaling and imagined an atomistic hierarchy with gravitation as the only field globally present. How is it that at 9 years old Timothy realized clearly that gravitation was the only field globally present? As you view him in the summer of the 1950 video, you must realize that months later in the fall of that year, his 5-year-old sister will go away to school and Timothy, then, in the fall of his 4th year, conducted experiments with the mysterious field of magnets and the field of gravitation, determining relative strengths and the presence of the separate fields of gravitation and magnetism. Gravitation is the invariant and is always there with or without magnetism present. And the fact is that, by that time in the fall of 1949, Timothy was in the course of extending his theory of elementary substances, namely earth, metals, air, fire, water and the field of gravitation, when the field of magnetism was introduced into the growing universe of Timothy. This highly mysterious second field appeared to surround a special kind of matter, a metal magnet, which is always the source of a magnetic field which is a special field which causes an attractive force between the metal magnet and other metals but not with other types of matter. The magnet is only attracted to other metals and not the fingers of Timothy who holds the magnet. The magnet is not attracted to wood. The magnet is only attracted to metals and the magnet only passes over very short distances. Again Timothy finds the gravitational field is universal and is always there and acts on the magnet and Timothy, and is not diminished or increased when the magnetic field is acting. This will become the passion of Albert Einstein in 1950 when Einstein is 71 years old. That passion is to structurally relate the fields of gravitation and electromagnetism, and that passion causes Einstein to write on the generalized theory of gravitation April 1950, introducing atomism as an example of the miracle creed. In Timothy's world, 1950 is the same year that Timothy, at 4 years old, has recognized, experimented and sought to look into the elementary structure of matter and how it is the source of the fields of gravitation and magnetism. With the field of magnetism arriving, and demanding great respect because of its strength compared to gravitation, the magnetic field is, none the less, inferior compared to the field of gravitation, since gravitation is always and everywhere present and acts on all matter, regardless of whether the magnetic field is or is not acting and present. Einstein failed in his 1950 attempts, as you see him walking 5 years later to the hospital in April 1955, which for Timothy was a half a lifetime later, 1950 to 1955, 4 years old to 9 years old. Then on the day of April 18, 1955, his third-grade school teacher Mrs. Feldman would announce the death of Einstein and describe atoms by drawing on the blackboard the solar system model of the carbon atom with 6 orbiting electrons. Hence in the morning of April 18, 1955, Timothy received from the adults a theory of atoms with which to build up and understand all the varying properties of the substances: earth, metal, air, fire, water, but not the infinitesimally smooth fields of gravitation and magnetism. At this time the vision of unifying phenomena brought by atoms caused in the brain of Timothy his first brain wave search, which is a rising resonance of brain waves emanating from the amygdala core. Timothy later, and at his request, produced on EEG a partial brain wave resonance which stunned the doctors at University of Iowa hospitals in November 1984. In any case, returning to the date of April 18, 1955, on April 18, 1955, in a stroke of natural creation 12 hours later, 12 hours after his first brain wave resonance in school, Timothy, a 9-year-old child, had a theory of the atomistic hierarchy with gravitation as the one and only field globally present throughout and dynamically enwrapping the structure of the universe as a whole, which then was made of atoms and hierarchies of atoms that made up the stars spread out in the night sky before him. Hundreds of millions to billions of children have conceived of the first part, the architecture of an atomistic hierarchy. However, they do not realize the import of the presence of gravitation globally enwrapping and very dynamically acting. We repeat, quote, very dynamically acting, end quote, and drawing the infinite structure together as a whole and as one and indivisible. All U.S. presidents should, and all scientists in all disciplines should have conceived of the possibility of an atomistic hierarchy when they were young, since peasants everywhere worldwide have so conceived. For example, as Timothy was told by his friend Mario in 1971, Mario in the mountains of Guadalajara, Mexico. in 1950s so conceived of an atomistic hierarchy immediately upon learning of atoms. Hence the American presidents, the self-proclaimed unifiers of the world as one and indivisible according to their greedy Americana vision, are little more than as Mario of Mexico and the children of the world. In effect, if each of the American presidents and especially physicist Jimmy Carter did not conceive of an atomistic hierarchy as children they are not fit to lead. There are 535 members of the U.S. Congress. What do they claim that they ever did, or what is their God-given vision for the world? Each of these 535 should have conceived of an atomistic hierarchy as children, as did a peasant of Mexico. Each should describe their childhood prodigy experiences on paper, or before their goddamn Washington, D.C. press. Let the U.S. President Barack Obama do the same. Each of these swine-hunt congressmen are censurers of the God-given birthright of the children of the world. If there is a God and Allah, then the facts exhibit that these 523 men and women and 5 U.S. presidents are godless. And may God damn them and let their Cosmos Studios in the 21st century write their film script and exhibit it in Deutschland, Russia, China, and for the children of the world. Reality check for the Americana Fox News. Facts. The first page of the 1976 polemic in defense of a physical theory known as the dimensional structure begins with a description of the theory as described in Heidelberg, Germany in September 1973, to wit: the galactic dimensional particle metaphysics in Einstein's theory. The perspicacious question arises concerning the two DVDs and international film proposed here. The question is, how do those young Heidelberg University students 42 years ago, so enthusiastic over the theory of hierarchical cosmology and gravitation, now think and feel about their theory, the theory of children, which was censored 42 years ago and to this day, June 28, 2015, with intent to censor for another 20 years. The fact is that not only those in 1973 at Heidelberg were censored, but also censored were their parents, their children and grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren will continue to be censored in the future. Does that disturb the American culture? A culture that also censors its own? Fact. Timothy V. Creer's grandmother was born Violet Gruber Jasinski in Heidelberg, Germany. Is that reality check sufficiently dramatic to suit the appetite of Bill O'Reilly? We examine now that which Einstein said about censor and plagiarism and the writing of a polemic in the July 1955 Scientific American interview with Einstein 2 weeks before he died. Historian of science Bernard Cohen states, Einstein was particularly interested in the various aspects of Newton's personality, and we discuss Newton's controversy with Hooke in the matter of priority in the inverse square law of gravitation. Hooke wanted only some mention in the preface to Newton's Principia, a little acknowledgement of his efforts, but Newton refused to make the gesture. End quote. The article goes on to quote Einstein, that, alas, is vanity. You find it in so many scientists. You know, it always hurt me to think that Galileo did not acknowledge the work of Kepler. End quote. About an international committee of inquiry into the matter of plagiarism over who invented the calculus, where Newton anonymously directed the committee's activities, historian Bernard Cohen describes Einstein as, quote, Einstein said that he was shocked by such conduct. He did not appear too much impressed when I asserted that it was the nature of the age to have violent controversies, that the standards of scientific behavior had changed greatly since Newton's day. Einstein felt that whatever the temper of the time, there is a quality of human dignity that should enable a man to rise above the passions of his age. End quote. On pages 69 and 70, Einstein addressed the writing of a polemic. Historian Bernard Cohen described the work of Benjamin Franklin and that Franklin was proud that he did not write a polemic. Historian Cohen describes Einstein's reply. Einstein only partly agreed. It was well to avoid personal fights, he said, but it was also important for a man to stand up for his own ideas. He should not simply let them go by default, as if he did not really believe in them. On the issue of censor, historian Bernard Cohen states, and we quote, Einstein was sorry that scientists in the U.S. had protested to publishers about the publication of such a book. He thought that bringing pressure to bear on a publisher to suppress a book was an evil thing to do. End quote. Cohen goes on to quote Einstein, the author of such a book might be crazy but not bad, just as the book was not bad. Cohen concludes Einstein expressed himself on this point with great passion. Next we see Einstein addressing the subject of a theory of photons when historian Bernard Cohen in effect gives credit to Einstein for doing something historic which Einstein recognizes as only partly correct. Historian Cohen addresses Einstein's Nobel Prize-winning photoelectric effect, which is one equation on Einstein's tablet at the Einstein Monument dedicated on April 22, 1979 by John Archibald Wheeler. We quote historian Cohen describing other men involved in the discovery of the photon. Quote, Einstein also expressed great admiration for Max Planck. Planck was a religious man, he said, and always sought to introduce the absolutes even on the basis of relativity. I asked Einstein whether Planck had ever accepted the theory of photons or whether he had continued to restrict his interest in the emission and absorption of light without regard to its transmission. Einstein stared at me for a moment or two in silence. Then he smiled and said, "No. Not a theory. Not a theory of photons!" And again his deep laughter enveloped us both. And the question was never answered. Cohen goes on that he remembered that Einstein's 1905 paper, for which nominally he was awarded the Nobel Prize, did not contain the word theory in the title but referenced instead considerations from a heuristic viewpoint. End quote. Of historian of science Bernard Cohen in Scientific American, July 1955. Today in June 2015, the Pluribus of UnUm Physics explains that which Einstein did not answer. What did Einstein mean by no? Not a theory. Not a theory of photons. The facts are that Einstein always recognized the source of phenomena. We repeat, the source of phenomena. Thus the question put to Einstein really was, what is the source of the photon? In order to answer the question as a physicist, one must have a theory of the structure of the source. That sentence should conclude with 3 exclamations, since that is a question which children can understand and which Timothy asked in 1949 with his experiments with a magnet. By the time of this interview in April 1955, it was 50 years after he had proposed in 1950 at 26 years old the photoelectric effect, and he did not for 50 years understand the principal reason behind the existence of the photon and how it was structurally related to the structure of the source, namely the elementary particles, protons and electrons, from which photons are emitted. The world, including historian Cohen, had credited Einstein for knowing everything even after Einstein said clearly that he did not know everything, in particular the structure of elementary matter and radiation, which were exactly the interests of Timothy in 1949 with his grandfather in the park and being blinded by the sun, and with his magnet trying to look inward into the elementary structure of matter, the source of the fields of gravitation and magnetism. Hence the question more exactly put to Einstein by historian Cohen was, what about the structure of the elementary particle or the source of the continuous fields and the photon? This was a question which Timothy was asking in 1949 with his grandfather in the park and examining the sun, and with his experiments with magnets. 1949 possibly being Timothy's miracle year at 4 years old. Let us examine the 3 equations on the Einstein tablet at the Einstein Monument. Equation 1 is the Einstein equation of the gravitational field surrounding any and every mass particle in the universe. Notice we use the word surrounding just as Einstein does in his classic book The Evolution of Physics, 1936, and 1960 in the section Field and Matter, which is easily read aloud and understood in 6th grade or before. Einstein does not say that the gravitational field emanates from the mass source, be it a planet or a star, since if Einstein had said emanates, That would imply that he understood the elementary structure of the source and how it generated the gravitational field which diverges from the mass source's surface. Is the improvement by Einstein on Newton's gravitational field structure a substantial advancement in understanding and enriching the structure of the gravitational field? The answer is yes, 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 and yes. How much of an improvement? Answer: Cornelia Frank Zolz in his classic The Einstein Decade accurately describes Einstein's gravitational field as a tenfold advance over the 1 over r squared field of Newton. Further, it is clearly possible for high school teachers or earlier to present on video the visual derivation of each of the 10 components in Einstein's gravitational field equation, which is equation 1 on the Einstein tablet. Equation 2 is, quote, the photoelectron effect, and it is easy for any primary school teacher 6th grade up to show visually, similar as did Mrs. Feldman in 3rd grade, how an electron in an atom of metal absorbs a photon and with the additional billiard ball-like energy escapes the surface of the metal and atomic and molecular forces of attraction of the metal. However, that demonstration will not reveal how the substructure of the electron which absorbs the photon is able to do so, since Einstein knows nothing about the substructure of electrons and protons and neutrons. Which is why he laughed when historians called Einstein's photoelectric effect, quote, the theory of photons. Looking now at the second equation on the Einstein tablet, the reality is that David Gross at KITT.UCSB.edu intentionally kept millions of people ill-informed and misinformed at the detailed knowledge about the structure of matter and how much Einstein and they knew about that structure. And people like Bill Riley at FoxNews.com, whose opiate it is to associate themselves with power, real or outright goddamn fraud, let Gross and Hartle at Physics.UCSB.edu get away with it. Equation 3 is the most famous equation in all physics from 3rd grade up, and it is E equals mc squared. Here again, billions of people assumed that Einstein had a detailed knowledge of the structure of the elementary particle substructure which constrains the latent energy of E equals mc squared in the form of photons of light in the Black effect. Again, that is a lie, and it is a malicious lie, since Einstein makes no assumption on the structure of the mass or on the structure of the photon or electromagnetic wave, as it is related to the structure of the mass which absorbs and emits the radiation of energy E on the structure of the field. 1970 is a theory of both the substructure of elementary particles and that includes photons. We will come back to that in part 3 or 4 of this series, where we will examine the highly sophisticated, brilliant attempts of Cornelia Frank Zolz in 1972 and 1974 in unifying the continuous gravitational and electromagnetic fields. We attach those here with the caution to do not let this scare you. These found ions of physics pages will not be included in the International Film for Child, and the subject matter will easily be handled in the dialogue between child prodigy at about 11 years old and Einstein at 50 years old through 76 years old in 1955, when the child prodigy points out where Einstein failed at a very early age. Next, we attach for videos. First, the video of Timothy V. Creer at the Einstein Monument in August 2005 as it relates to the American First Amendment right of freedom of speech. Video 2 following his PBS News Elegant Universe with Brian Greene and David Gergen on April 26, 1999, as Brian Greene certainly does exercise his freedom of speech and does garnish your great expectations and respect with which he gains power in censoring the theory of hierarchical cosmology and gravitation, which has been censored since 1979 and the Einstein Centennial Symposium. Those videos are followed by an excerpt of David Gross in Stockholm accepting the 2004 Nobel Prize, with which he garnishes power and respect to censor further the theory of the Swazy v. Charlie Air, Timothy V. Creer N.D. Cheng of China. That video is followed by Gross at Berkeley on October 19, 2007 with quote, "Coming revolutions in fundamental physics." We notice that Gross and Company in October 2004 want the National Science Foundation to fund the National Institute for Theoretical Physics for 25 more years so that they, and especially Hartle at physics.ucsb.edu, can search for the elusive graviton. In hierarchical cosmology, the photon is the graviton, as hundreds of millions of children will realize come the International Film. Also consider that in October 2007 the economy is booming and the worldwide crash will not happen for 6 more months. Fact, at that time 2007 I am living in an overflow sewer pipe and having January 2007 film.